Howdy folks, this is Shanth Enjeti from Shanth Enjeti Art, coming to you at 11:38, one of George Lucas's favorite numbers, with a stream that I've lovingly decided to start calling Not Suitable for Woke, because it just made me laugh. And I am painting with a brand new setup tonight, very excited about it. Finally bought myself an art desk. I know it might be hard to imagine that I don't own an art desk, but I don't have one in my home studio, and partially that's because I wanted to get ready for my setup that I'm going to need in the fall, and also because things were getting a bit out of hand in terms of my space. I was having to clamp my my microphone and my lights to all these different things, and so I got a light that clamps to my desk, and I've got a microphone right here that clamps to my desk, and then set up for my phone that hooks up to my desk. Hey, there's the boss. Good to see you, sir. Hope you're having a good one. Loving your content lately. Absolutely fantastic. I gotta get to work on a Starship Valiant poster at some point, don't I? But I decided to get started on a stream. And now that I've got this set up finally, where I can get to work on things, it's going to make it easier. I usually have to set up and move my lamps and everything like that every single time I do a stream, and then move them back. So just having some cheap lamps that I can kind of connect to my desk has made life so much easier. So we'll see. We'll see how long I can keep this setup going, which I think should be for a good while. I'm watching an absolutely terrifying show right now on Netflix as I work. I've got the volume down so I don't get copyright struck, I think is the thing I'm looking for. A show called The Kingdom. It's a South Korean show about swords during a feudal time and zombies, and it's really cool. And I learned about it by watching Korean artist and genius, South Korean artist, I'm going to pronounce his name terribly, but I believe it's Kim Jung-ji, if I'm pronouncing it right. And I'd never heard of the show, even though I should have. And it's fantastic. Oh, absolutely. Ready? It is staring over Frankenstein, and it is a Cthulhu creature. I know it's probably pronounced Thulu. That's coming through a portal that's just been opened up. And then this is one of my characters. Actually, that would have been easier to do. I don't know why I adjusted the camera. So he's pulling this valve, opening up a doorway above. And this creature is coming through the doorway and giving life to a Frankenstein's monster, as this other character of mine is kind of trying to stop it and shooting at that character. So, kind of influenced by The Shadow and The Phantom and The Punisher and some of my favorite characters, and then references to Frankenstein and of course H.P. Lovecraft kind of horror stuff, and my love of Del Toro as always. Go. Let's see if I can get that closer, actually. There we are. Oh, that's creepy. Looks creepier than I thought it did when it was further away. There we go. There, the brush can see it. Hope everything is good in Oklahoma, my friend. We're supposed to be getting some storms. I guess it's the leftover of that tropical storm. It's coming up the coast. Let's see if that works. It's okay. That's getting there. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I had this. Oh yeah, you got a storm. Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I absolutely appreciate it. Yeah, I've always been thinking about how I could combine, and I'm not by any stretch the first person to think of things like this, but I always thought it would be kind of cool to tie that kind of just creepiness into the creation of like a Frankenstein's monster, and then evolve this idea that I've had just for paintings. It never really turns into a script or anything like that. But to evolve the idea so that he becomes almost like this Melville-like character that's hunting these evil leviathans kind of coming through trying to destroy civilization, with a, kind of based on the character whose name I'm going to get wrong, but the harpooner in Moby Dick. I think his name was... I always get him confused with the George Lucas character from the Skiff in Return of the Jedi, but I believe it's Queequeg, if I'm getting that right. Or Queequeg. I think I'm getting it wrong, but that's the idea. So I've done a couple of paintings where I have that character with these really cool tattoos and things like that. So it's Frankenstein without his nose, with a scrimshaw nose covering, which is one of the paintings that's going to be in the book, and what do you call it? And a tattoo on his shoulder that kind of goes down that looks like a kind of squid creature. And so that's one of my things I'm interested in illustrating. Just making kind of like a horror party, and yeah, I'm just super into, right now anyway, I feel like I'm always kind of into Halloween year round. It's like kaiju movies are something I watch oftentimes in the spring and in the winter, which would seem to be the opposite. And then what do you call it, horror movies I start wanting to watch in the summer. It's like I've got everything backwards, It's just, I'm like, why am I in the mood to be watching a zombie attack show on Netflix right now? But it's just the kind of space I'm in at this point. Let's see if this works. There we go. But I grew up on well, all kinds of different stuff. But I was a huge Freddy Krueger fan, much like Michael in the chat is. And I had that, I remember getting the head covering Freddy Krueger mask and desperately wanting the one that had the neck piece that went all the way down to the shoulders, and those cheap sort of foam hats that came with it. And I remember I was so excited just to have a Freddy Krueger mask, and I remember I got one of those plastic gloves that they used to sell. I mean, now they've got way better stuff. And I had a Jason mask at the same time. So I've always kind of been a big, horror fan. And in terms of the aesthetics, I'm not the, I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge that some people have, but I was always a huge fan of the aesthetics of it. You know what? I will tell you this. I used to, and I will tell you one of the greatest secrets I learned from my buddy Nick, who I share a studio space with when COVID isn't going nuts, and when things are somewhat normal. And he told me how he improved his oil paintings, which he's a master painter. And he said to me that, he has a little sand timer that gives him 30 minutes, and he flips it, and he said, the painting is done at 30 minutes, no matter where I'm at. So it's almost like the painting, because a painting can be worked on forever, it's kind of arbitrary, and we can get lost in that. But when we tell ourselves, our workday ends at this point, it's as good as it can be in this amount of time. That's the key. And so for me, I set certain time limits for myself and try to balance, how I can get things done and keep the quality up. Because I think that's what we all struggle with, right? Like how much detail we need to have. Oh, nice. Brian Stelfreeze. Good to see you, Sarah. Brian Stelfreeze. Love Brian. Excellent. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's good to hear from you. Yeah, Stelfreeze. Yeah, you guys were so lucky to have him come to the college. Like every class has secretly hoped that they would get a Stelfreeze visit. The master, the artist who taught me so much of what I do, and just made it all feel attainable. So the fact that you were able to get some time in, Sarah, with Brian in a classroom is amazing, and I'm so glad that worked for you, because I know you're a huge fan of comics and manga and art and a lot of the same stuff. It's just great stuff. But yeah, for me, I think the biggest thing for me on these projects that I'm working on is to give myself a time limit for what I need to get done. But I think the big thing that I'm doing right now in crunch on this bit, and again, it's crunch because I want to make sure it's crunch with the caveat that I want to make sure it looks as good as it needs to. So to grab a couple of things that some of you guys have probably seen, but I don't know. This is the kind of detail and stuff that's going into the book. I mean, these are tiny. Excellent. Yeah, Brian's the best. And I will say that's one of the great things about being in a space where you get to meet people like that. It's just the coolest thing. I remember some of the students who've met Brian the last time he was up this way, and I think that would have been in the 2000s, early 2000s, I mean. They still talk about it, what an amazing experience it was. Here's another example of the kind of next level, for me anyway, next stage, let's say, not next level, that sounds a little too cool for me, detail that I'm putting into this piece right now. So we've got a lot of stuff happening in this one now. It's really starting to come together. But all of these, the goal for all of these is to get it to let's see if I can get this to work here. Get it to the point that Akira Kurosawa referred to and George Lucas similarly referred to as creating an immaculate reality. So bringing a level of detail to the game to where the beauty and the kind of wholeness of a work, funny enough, I'm sitting here over my shoulder watching the South Korean produced, I believe, and directed and created Netflix show Kingdom, and the sense of reality in the show is just breathtaking. I'm just marveling at the detail and this use of horror with today's kind of capabilities. And that's what it's about to me, is just that immaculate reality. I think manga does it really well. I think great imaginative fiction does it well. And it's not about budget. It's about choice, and it's about skill level. The craziest thing for me that I try to challenge myself with is that for me to, in terms of outside of time and skill and learning how to do it, for me to paint a huge expansive cityscape does not cost as much as me doing it in CG. It's free if I can do it. And when I watch a show like this, they have so many more challenges and maybe some more resources, but their aesthetics are amazing. Well, Michael, that's a great question. I would say, how do I word this? Because I've spent so much time thinking about this and how to explain it. to people, like in terms of my take on it, not how to explain it from the sense that I have the answer. I used to think that my style was, how do I word it? Well, you're a director, you know what I'm talking about, but I used to think that my style was something I was going to have to find. And what I always say is that, and I think I heard an artist say this before too, a couple things. When I'm not thinking about it and I'm trying to do something accurately, and I fail, that's my style in some ways. But as I evolve, I find it's kind of like my signature. That the better I get at writing letters and speeding up and bringing a certain level of grace to what I do, the more my style emerges, if that makes sense. And go get working, Sarah, and have a good night. And take care. The thing for me is that I worked really hard. If I could have drawn like any artist, I would have drawn like Todd McFarlane. I mean, there is, if you can see, there's a signed poster from Todd McFarlane, original piece of Todd McFarlane artwork that I got when I was 14, was given to me. It's like crazy. There's no Spider-Man in it or anything, but it's like gold to me. And then you can see a Todd McFarlane style Hulk and Spider-Man up there. And so my whole dream when I was pretty much up into my 20s was to draw like Todd McFarlane. And the cool thing to me about teaching and what I love is when you give somebody the fundamentals, the style just comes along with it. And it's hard to describe. I really do believe that, based on experience, frankly, that I can teach anybody to paint and anyone color theory, anyone how to make art. It's really not that hard to do. And Stelfreeze helped me to understand that. If you don't know who Brian Stelfreeze is, check out his Instagram and stuff. He's amazing. And the thing I got about it that I kind of come back around to. Yes. Oh yeah. So here's here's my Todd McFarlane story. So when you're a kid and you're growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I grew up, just north of Atlanta, and you have a name like Shanth Enjeti, no one knows how to pronounce your name, and certainly no one knows how to spell your name. And as a kid, I always sort of felt like I had a lot to prove in terms of being seen as an American, and I was very proud of being an American. I don't, I'm I'm 1/4 Austrian, 1/4 Puerto Rican, and half Indian. So this is the only country I got, and I was born in Houston. So, this is my space. And Todd McFarlane was my hero. When I was 14, I went to go and meet him. And I was so nervous. It was one of those instances where you're meeting someone who's an absolute art hero to you. And while I don't want to be too dramatic and put this on Todd McFarlane, it's the kind of thing to where you realize, like, wow, that would have been tough if it hadn't been a good experience. So I get up to the front of the line and I want him to sign my Hulk versus Wolverine poster, which is basically a poster made out of his Hulk 340 cover. And I get up to the front of the line. He goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "Shanth Enjeti." It's so can you please write to Shanth? And before I could spell it for him, he takes his pen and just starts writing on the poster to Shanth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna write Sean, or he's gonna write John, or he's gonna write, which is, frankly, I've just been happy to have his signature. And he spins the poster around. I look at it, and he spelled my name right. And I gotta be honest with you, if a stranger came up to me and it wasn't my name, I wouldn't be able to spell my name right, let alone pronounce it. And it was like, even though he's a Canadian born in California, but it just felt like this guy who draws Spider-Man, this most American of comics, who's drawn Captain America, the X-Men, on Marvel Tales covers, and the Hulk, all of these things I love, and eventually Spawn, had just written my name, and it almost felt like a welcome to the club moment, as crazy as that might sound. And I just realized I'm painting off frame. That's hilarious. There we go. There we are. And it was just so huge for me. And I remember thinking, I'm always going to take time if I ever find myself in a situation where I'm helping, younger artists or whatever, which is probably why I went into education, in my 20s, was I'm going to always give them the time that Todd McFarlane gave me at the convention. The same thing goes with Brian Stelfreeze. But Todd was a real hero for me. And if you had asked me when I was younger who I'd like to draw like, I would have said Todd McFarlane. That's who I want to draw like when I come up. But the thing is that to draw like Todd McFarlane, I would have to be kind of engineered like Todd McFarlane. And I'm just not. Like, I see things and I interpret them in a little bit more of a naturalistic way. So the biggest thing for finding one style is getting with a teacher and working with a teacher who's able to spot elements of how you see the world in your work as you develop, and then introduce you to parent artists, which is huge for me. So the artists who I found in college, who I never thought I would, have anything in common with, was an artist by the name of Alphonse Mucha. I love Dave Stevens, the creator of The Rocketeer. I'm a massive Dave Stevens fan, even though I can't really draw like him. Mobius, the French comic book artist. And, gosh, I'm trying to think of who else I've got kicking around here. That's what I can think of right now. Character designers or artists who create great monsters and creatures like... who else? Guillermo del Toro does, of course, one of my favorite artists. But I never would have thought in a million years that I would be painting. That's the wildest thing of all, that I ended up painting, because I was terrified of color and I was terrible at painting all the way through college. Because one of the things I can definitely say about my college that I went to is they didn't force a style on us. And the reason why they never really forced a style on us is because, for the most part, they never taught us how to paint. We didn't learn any skills. I had one or two teachers who kind of introduced me to some skills, but for the most part, everything I learned about skill, I learned from Brian Stelfreeze and from books and from trial and error. So by the time, one of the big disadvantages I think I ran into, and that people run into when they're not taught the craft or the skills of picture making, is that you don't get a chance to figure out what your style is. All you can do is take your faults and try to justify them. And I wasn't doing that. I never really was into it. I just looked at my stuff and thought, this is garbage. I hated my stuff because I was slow. I didn't know how I wanted to work. And, now... all the pieces in this book that are coming out now that I'm in the groove of putting the finishing detail in, they've all been done in less than 7 months. And there's a tremendous amount of detail in this work. I mean, just huge. Oh, wow. I like Don Bluth. I think probably, this is how funny it is, because I didn't have a good pause on my VCR. I used to take reference photos of the owl. Whoops, there that goes. There we go. Caught it. Of the owl from The Secret of Nim. Its eyes and those giant sort of feathery brows it had. And I always tried to design characters inspired by that. So I love Don Bluth. I like Glenn Keane. I think Glenn Keane is great. Who else do I like? I like Mark Davis, the Disney animator Mark Davis. And who else do I like? Oh, yeah. One of my favorite animators is one of not the original Mickey Mouse animator, Ub Iwerks, is an animator who tragically died, I think maybe in his 40s, but he was too young. A guy by the name of Freddie Moore, who's responsible for a lot of the late classic Mickey stuff. He did the centaurs in Fantasia, and was just sort of this amazing artist to influence people like Chris Sanders. So I think Fred Moore is one of my favorites. But, I love Don Bluth, who I mean, that was a huge part of my youth when Don Bluth and Steven Spielberg, teamed up. That was big for anybody who was interested in art. I'm sure it was big for you, because that's the language we speak, right? Is storytelling and cinema. I mean, I don't work in cinema, to be clear. I know that Michael does, but the thing for me is I am a huge cinema fan. I mean, I think that's why. While if push comes to shove, I'll always say that my favorite Trek is the TV shows. I love the shows a lot. I was introduced to Star Trek by the I hope I don't butcher his name, Nicholas Meyer Star Trek movies. So the ones he wrote and the ones he directed. So the one that I believe Nimoy directed, The Voyage Home, Undiscovered Country, which Meyer directed, I believe, and wrote, and of course Wrath of Khan, which I had the privilege of seeing. I think it was last year, or the year before, at the Providence Performing Art Theater, and William Shatner did a Q&A live afterwards, and that was on my wife's bucket list. She's a massive Star Trek fan, so I got to see William Shatner live from a distance, but it was just amazing. But I think that's the thing for me, which is I'm really obsessed with and fascinated by storytelling. It's one of my favorite authors right now that I'm reading, just a new love as a storyteller, is Mel Brooks. Has a son who's a writer named Max Brooks, and he wrote the book World War Z, which is so different from the movie, and I enjoy the movie, but man, is that book incredible. And he just wrote a kind of horror suspense Bigfoot story called Devolution, or De-Evolution, I don't know how to pronounce it, Devo. And I just finished the audiobook of that, and it's just amazing. So epic. Oh, she introduced me to Star Trek. You can see the Enterprise D painting up there. I did that as a kind of reference to the one in Picard's Ready Room. And it's also based on another painting of sailboats she has in the house, and it's a little reference, but she is the big Trek fan. For her 19th birthday, when we had just started dating, we went to go see, and this'll date me as a young Trek fan in some ways, even though I'd seen other Trek movies in theaters. We saw a midnight showing, opening night of First Contact, and she's a massive Next Gen fan, a big Star Trek fan in general. But my kids actually beat us playing original series Star Trek trivia games. They beat us because they know all the stats. So my daughter is a massive Voyager fan. My son, what is his favorite Trek? That's tough to say. I think he likes, I'd say, Next Gen the most, but I'm not positive, and maybe the original series. My wife is a Next Gen person, and I'm an original series person, although if I could live in a Star Trek world, it would be the Next Generation, but that's a tough call. Because I love Matthew Jeffrey's design for the original series. I think it's genius. I mean, gosh, those guys were amazing. That's why I like Starship Valiant so much. I could just live in that world. It's great. But yeah, when my wife found out that you direct Star Trek fan film, she was just like, which I think it's a bit of an understatement, like, to call those fan films. Those things are incredible. It's like stepping back in time, I'd like to see Valiant on my television. I'm like that on a streaming service. But it's just, she flipped out. She was so excited. Oh, I can't wait to see it. I flipped out. One of as soon as I wrap a lot of this stuff up, and probably on a break when I'm working on it, I would love to do a painting, a head sketch, like just a simple, like, little watercolor sketch, like a 4x6 study of you in makeup from the photo you posted on Facebook. That was incredibly cool. I love makeup effects too. I've never done them, but I've always been a fan of them. Love Rick Baker. Love Stan Winston, of course, who we've talked about on a previous stream. Just great guys. Amazing talents. There we go. That's starting to come together. But I think, did I go off the page again or no? Was I still on it? I think I was still on it. Oh no, I'm below it now. That's what I'm doing. I was like, why is it not showing up? I keep forgetting where I'm painting. There we go. Let's see here. Let's move this up. That down. And there we go. And I'm going to tip, whoops. There we go. I'm going to tip that back just so my brush doesn't get blocked. There we go. Excellent. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things my wife introduced me to. I was not the classiest guy. I didn't know a lot of things. I don't think she always jokes I hadn't had cream cheese until I met her. So, you know, what are you going to do? But I had Slim Jims, so there's that. But she introduced me to Star Trek, and I just fell in love with it. And her family is super into Star Trek. You know, my late father-in-law was amazing, huge Trek fan. Yeah, I know. I'm new to this stuff. You probably know about this stuff a lot more than I do. At some point, we'll have to do a stream together when I can figure out how to do that. That would be a blast. I would love to talk about any number of subjects that we have in common. Although I think some, like Trek, you might be a bigger expert in. But I'm not adverse to listening, I can tell you that. I love hearing people talk about the things that they're passionate about. If it wasn't for you talking about Hammer horror films, that's the power to me of YouTube. If it wasn't for you talking about Hammer horror films, there's about 10 or 15 films that wouldn't be in my Blu-ray collection at this point. You know, I just was like, how have I not known about these? These are so amazing. I mean, it's crazy. You know, and of course, Shout Factory is costing me some money, I have to say. But there's a YouTuber I was looking at, and I forget what his exact YouTube is. I'll have to put it in the description at some point when I upload this. But he does horror collectibles, horror monster collectibles. And he just reviewed a Nosferatu figure from Mezco that looks amazing. And so I will tell you, YouTube has definitely been amazing for me in terms of getting to kind of meet people that are interested in the things I'm interested in. Because I'm much more of a pop culture fan than I am a fine artist in that sense. And that's been the field I should say, certainly in academia, that's been the field I've worked in for my 20s and late 20s and all of my 30s. And, you know, I think lately YouTube has been really great for reconnecting me with those aspects of myself that they're so necessary to me. You know, it's great to meet people from all over. I think it makes our world less small. And, you know, if it wasn't for some of these channels, I think my life would be a lot poorer for not having a lot of you guys in it. I know. Yeah, well, you also know, right? If we weren't married, too, that's a factor. My wife always makes little jokes about how it's starting to creep in. And I've seen your Godzilla stuff hanging out in the background too. I have to kind of pace myself with this stuff, you know. I honestly, to be honest, my biggest obsession is, if I had to pick, is Blu-rays and books. But yeah, I definitely am not. I'm not opposed to the odd collectible. When I found out that there was a company, and I don't know if they're still selling them, but there was a company that did a custom Wesley Snipes blade head. Wow, this is shaking like crazy. I'm gonna stop moving that there. I was so excited about it and ordered it, and yeah, I had to have that movie. I remember seeing Blade in the movie theater, and I think, funny enough, I think that Blade is one of the things, probably one of the big things that caught my eye when I was going through YouTube channels, and I saw that Blade poster, and I was like, Blade! I was like, oh! I was like, he likes Blade. And I stopped, and then I was like, whoa! He likes Godzilla and King Kong. We have very similar opinions on what's going on with Star Wars. Oh, God. Oh, it's too painful. Ugh. But yeah, I mean, that's the stuff right there. If I'm not mistaken, too, Michael, I think you had been talking about, on a previous stream, I could be wrong, about seeing the original King Kong in the movie theater, which I would love the opportunity to do that at some point. Hopefully I'll get the opportunity at some point, but I've projected it on the wall, like over our windows, because it's not like we have a home theater or anything like that. But and it's great seeing it that way. But in a movie theater, it must be incredible. I'd love to see that. Let's see if I've got this lined up right. There we go. But yeah, I mean, my favorite people with who do collectibles work is there's a gentleman by the name of Rafael Robledo Jr. Hope I'm not butchering his name either. Who does custom work on statues, and he is actually, I'm gonna type that in the chat. And I don't know his address, or his YouTube channel, but he's amazing. Just amazing. It depends, not too often. I tend to go with things like brushes. When I'm doing detail work like this, I go through them. But the watercolors I use, I just got a new set because I just dug down to the depths on that set. But I would say probably I replenish my paint sets maybe once every 6 months, and we're talking about like those little tiny pans of color, but I've had them for a year, and sometimes I'll move back and forth to old ones and just scrub them out. But they cost about $20, I think it is, and they work for me. And a tube of gouache can last me, like this can last me a year. And these are a little expensive, but they're a necessity for me for my style of painting, is to have a tube of zinc white gouache, and then these, frankly, not very expensive paints. I think, let me just see what I have kicking around here. I'm not positive. But I'm pretty sure somewhere I had a recently purchased. Is that it right there? Yeah. Here's a recently purchased paint box that I just got. This is what the cover of the paint box that I use to do all my work looks like. There is a cartoon crab on the cover, and this is the exact set that I use. It's opaque paint box watercolors by Pelican, and people see this and they're like, you use those paints to do what you do? This is everything I've got. And the crazy thing about it is I want to say this is a huge tube of zinc white gouache, Winsor Newton zinc white gouache, and this tube probably costs about, maybe it costs $18, $19, $20. So this is almost as expensive as this, but you don't use it as fast. But that's the stuff that I use. And then these synthetic brushes. And I'd say I replace my synthetic brushes probably every couple of months. I'll get like 6, and I'll use them until I'm done. And I go through my supplies a lot quicker when I'm teaching, because one of my bad habits, or good habits depending, is I have a tendency to give art supplies when students don't have art supplies to them. One of those things. My wife and I both have that particular tendency, because that's what it is when you're teaching. I remember how important it was, to have art supplies, and what it meant to me when someone would loan me art supplies or give me something to use. That was always huge for me. we go. Starting to get the texture of this thing. And give it this kind of believability. When people get a book of my stuff, I always want them to feel like, in addition to the color, in addition to the beautiful paintings, you know, aspect of it, like that they'll look at and go, oh, this is a beautiful painting. I also want them to get that sense I used to get when I was looking at special effects artwork. You know, whenever I would see a close-up of behind the scenes, we've talked about this, is the Stan Winston studio stuff. I would look at that stuff and watch them sculpting, you know, the T-Rex or the Brachiosaurus, you know, in clay, and just go, oh my gosh, I want to create paintings that feel like you could run your hand over them and you'd feel the texture of the creature. Or even the giant, what was it called? Kraken in Pirates that was done in CG by ILM. I've always loved that stuff. And I've wanted to have that kind of feel, you know, when I'm creating my work, that sense of it being something tactile you can touch and feel the characters. Whoa! there it goes. Don't worry. It's just landing on a table down here, but I've got to get that stable. I've got to get some rubber bands to hold that in. But I want to get that quality of the work, where you feel that kind of, again, that immaculate reality and that believability, and that usually involves me getting the value sorted out on this stuff. And so right here, if you look at that little bit of texture that I've just done, what I'm gonna do is, if I can get it to work, I'm gonna mix up a lighter, warmer color. Let me see how bright that is. And I'm going to go in now and I'm going to do a 3 value range. So I've got a middle value there. I've got a dark value, which is what all those lines are basically for. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in a 3rd value. And just by having something as simple as those 3 values, and none of them are white and none of them are black, they're just right in the middle, because that's the big mistake I do when I'm an artist, is I would want to go in and put in really dark darks and really light lights. And the problem with that is that you give yourself no room to move. And if you stay in the middle and then just have that beautiful, it should be a sensational place in the painting, like where you really want people to look, where you use black and where you use white, because those are the most powerful parts of your value and color spectrum. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is just making sure that I put those 3 values in, and the second I do that, you can start to feel that dimensional quality. It starts to kind of rise off the paper. When I'm teaching my students, I have them do a really I don't want to say simple exercise, but a very core exercise, which is this thing called the Ivandurl tree. And most students, after just doing like 2 Ivandurl assignments, they feel like they've learned how to paint, and they're just amazed. There we go. And so now we start to get that kind of texture coming together. And that sort of brings something to the table there. You know, that's the thing that is always going to be a big part for me when I'm working. Now let's see what else I can do here. Gonna mix up a little orange. And I'm going to wash that orange right over top here. And kind of knock those values down just a bit, because I don't want them to steal too much attention. And then things start to kind of marry together a little bit more. And it works really nicely. There we go. Yeah, but Lauren is a massive, massive Star Trek fan, and we are absolutely waiting for your next one. When I saw the Facebook post that you guys had wrapped, and by the way, congratulations to the cast and crew of the film. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Please pass that along for me. But I was very excited. I told my kids about it, and you know, we're just, as a family, we're looking forward to watching it together. And it's great to see good new Trek coming out. You know, very cool. There we go. It's starting to come together. So let's zoom out here and see what we got to do here. There we go. See how those containers are doing. I've got these cables pretty well detailed. I'm going to probably need to do a little bit more in there. And the creature's starting to come together. I've got that little detail happening in the teeth right there, and then the spikes. So we'll see where we go from here. Let's tilt this up just a little bit so we can see a little bit more of this. There we go. Okay, I think that's starting to work a little bit. Need some water. Gotta keep myself hydrated and standing up straight. My late night powers are pretty good, but as my kids get older, we're having a lot more late night watch parties of shows, and they're able to last as long as I can these days. So I have to send them off to bed so I can do these streams and get some art time in. There we go. We've been watching a show called Farscape together, because it's, you know, right up their alley. I always say it's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's a TV series. And so we've been watching that. I'm a big fan of Jim Henson and his creature stuff. I was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, and I remember when that movie came out, I had the first graphic novel, and one of my favorite works of art that I would draw when I was a kid was the cover of the first graphic novel, and that's the name of the publisher that Kevin Eastman had done the painting of, where Michelangelo is silhouetted in the back of the painting, and Rafael, who was my favorite Ninja Turtle, was standing on a mattress in the foreground, and I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't imagine ever being able to paint, because I was just drawing at that point, but I used to copy drawings from that book. So when the movie came out by Jim Henson, who was another one of my heroes, I was obsessed with the animatronics of that film, and just a huge, huge fan of it. So watching Farscape, when that came out, seeing kind of the next step of what they were doing at Henson is pretty cool to see. But I always have a special place in my heart for Jim Henson. That's just the way it is. It's like, God, I'm gonna pronounce his name wrong too. Is it Carlos Rambaldi, who did E.T. and the 76 King Kong? You know, some of those artists are just gonna be favorites of mine. That's just how it is. You know what? I'll take a look at it. I'm not too worried about it. I mean, they've seen some stuff. So, you know, in terms of my son, I'm not too worried about because he's 14 and he's seen Gladiator, so he should be okay. And she's getting exposed to more stuff lately. Actually, what am I saying? My daughter has seen Taken, so as long as it's within the range of Taken and Gladiator, we should be okay. They're a little older at this point, so yeah. So yeah, they should be okay with it, you know. And you know, we can watch it first too. If you're concerned about it, we'll take a gander at it and see. But you know, I'm gonna have a heck of a time telling them they don't get to watch your latest, because you know they're excited, they're fans, so it's tough. I don't always let that, you know, trump my parental whatever. But I'm sure it's dealing with things. I mean, I haven't shown them. I haven't shown them. They're not at the point where I've shown them Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List at this point. But I think they're at the age where, that stuff in context by a sensitive artist is never gonna hurt, their growth. I think it can only sort of serve it. And I think of some of the stuff I saw when I was their age. I mean, good Lord, they might be a lot more sheltered than. Well, that's not hard to do, but they're certainly more sheltered than I was. My favorite movie on VHS when I was in elementary school, I think it was Beverly Hills Cop. And one of the movies I saw in a theater when I was, see if I can do the math here, I think I was maybe 10 or 11. I saw RoboCop in the theater. So, yeah. The stuff I was seeing was definitely a bit heavy for the time. And that RoboCop was stuck in my mind, but I fell in love with the character. Love that character design of the original RoboCop, and Ed 209 I thought was just brilliant. And I'm a huge Phil Tippett fan as well. Love the stop motion in that. I think that's starting to come together now. It's like so busy enjoying my conversation with you guys that I'm not even paying attention to that. I think this piece is really coming together. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. Kind of gets my mind off of overthinking it sometimes to have you guys here. And it feels like conversation with friends, which is nice. And I suppose it is. It's the best thing about it. I think when people share movies, DVDs, comics, and art, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the basis of friendship. I remember going to Dragon Con when I was a kid, and going to conventions. I went to San Diego Comic-Con a few times when it was small, and it was actually about comics, funny enough, and things like anime and manga that hadn't really, hit the mainstream yet and had their own conventions, and that was the best part of it. I've never been to a Star Trek convention, though, and that's one of my wife's dreams, is to go to one. So at some point we're going to have to do that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just saw the robot armor design, which I thought was amazing for RoboCop, but I was not prepared for the Murphy murder scene, I can tell you that. Yes. Yeah, Verhoeven, man. I mean, that movie continues to get smarter with every viewing for me. Like, or maybe I get less dumb. I don't know how it works. But, I mean, as a kid, I saw it, and I must have drawn RoboCop like a billion times when I was a kid. And I had the tremendous honor when I was in school, and I didn't even know this, but I met a movie poster artist by the name of Alan Reingold. I took a class with him. And actually, I will say this, even though he was just teaching a winter session class, which is like an elective class, I got a chance to take a class with him, and he did teach me some skills and introduced me to some movies. And I'm talking to him about movie posters, and I said, my favorite movie poster of all time? Like, I cut it out of the newspaper, and I put it in a comic book bag and board, was the RoboCop movie poster when it was in black and white in the newspaper. And he just looked at me and just nonchalantly was like, yeah, I painted that. I was like, so yeah, Alan Reingold is the artist who painted the RoboCop poster. That's an oil painting. There's no photo in that, just photo reference. He painted the RoboCop stepping out of the car door, and he painted the Batman Returns poster with Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Michael Keaton, the three heads lined up poster. He's a genius and just an incredible artist, Alan Reingold. He's up there with Drew Struzan and Bob Peak for me as far as movie poster artists go. He's a genius. And it was a very kind guy. I've emailed him from time to time. Oh, Total Recall. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Total Recall. Gosh, I forget about, how do I word it? I don't connect Total Recall with RoboCop for some reason, but it's crazy. Like, yeah, there's so many great films that, you know, he's done. And I remember seeing Total Recall in the movie theater as well. I remember, of course, that great scene of the mask opening up. That was just awesome. I loved that. I loved the action. I loved the Arnold one-liners. And then, of course, the whole thing about the Mars, you know, atmosphere contraption with the little hand activator. I thought that was awesome. I loved that part in the movie. But yeah, I think that movie, you know, of his other films, and I think Starship Troopers is close, but Starship Troopers is a bit more epic, had a bigger, you know, budget, but I think Total Recall is the closest in terms of its scope and style. It's a little bit bigger scope to RoboCop. I think Starship Troopers, like Total Recall, is the bridge in terms of what he was doing technically between RoboCop and Starship Troopers, because those movies just all exponentially jumped up in terms of how sophisticated the technical aspect of them were. But I'd like to see another science fiction movie from him. Let me see here. How's that working? Okay. Gotta make sure I'm stabilizing this thing so I don't drop my paper again. Now I gotta figure out what I want to do with these tusks. I think what I'm gonna do with them is I think I'm gonna make them a yellow kind of goldish color for starters, and then we'll see where that goes. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And again, for those of you coming here late, my name is Shanth Enjeti, and this is Shanth Enjeti Art. There's a link in the description to my art book that I know a lot of you guys have already picked up, and I thank you. If you want to catch it before I close the Indiegogo, it's already funded, and this piece is going to be in it along with a bunch of other works. And I will tell you, one of the big fears about doing an art book after following up my first art book was I wanted it to be a jump up in class, at least be as good, and my goal was for it to be work that I thought was even more technically skilled and artistically interesting. And I can tell you, I have no doubt I've done this with book 2. And up until about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, I was like, I don't know, I want to know for certain. And I love the work in it. I just love it. Thank you very much, sir. Take care and have a great evening. I appreciate you stopping by, and I'm looking forward to your next videos as always, my friend. All right, let's see here. What else have I got to do here? All right, put some color in here. And everybody check out Michael at The Choice Voice if you haven't yet. Does great videos on horror, pop culture, genre, video games, you name it. Michael does great videos. And then also check out Starship Valiant. Starship Valiant has its own YouTube channel, I believe, and Starship Valiant is just some amazing fan works of cinematic storytelling based on the Star Trek universe, the original series Star Trek universe. Michael is a director, he's an actor, he's a renaissance man when it comes to his cinematic work. So do check that out if you are catching this stream later. And I'm going to try to put a link to all this in the description once I'm done. Yeah, Michael's great. Michael does all kinds of amazing stuff and very cool stuff. Well said. Well said. we go. That's starting to come together there. Let me see here. There we go. Let's see, what else have I got to do here? Got these cables set up in here. Got the teeth. So there's a nice jump there to there to there. And it opens up again over here. And I think I need to have a little bit more value in there. That's the next bit. There we go. And so by putting that dark in there, I've just been able to move it off the background because it was too close in value to the background. And when something's too close to value, it puts it in the same plane of space. And I always want to try to bring that out from that space. So yeah, we're really starting to get there with this one. This one's starting to come together. And you know, of course, there's like the gigantic sort of like King Kong Godzilla piece I've got behind it. It's going to also be in the book. That's going to be somewhat, you know, in repose in the cover. But this is the world that we're creating here. This is the creature being given life, and the guy kind of coming in to stop the mad scientist slash cultist, as in the Lovecraft world. And yeah, that's the plan for this. So I'm at about an hour, and I'm about ready to fall asleep. And my hand's getting a bit unsteady. But I want to tell everybody to have a great evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Shanth Enjeti, Shanth Enjeti Art. And please check out the link in the description for the INDIEGOGO, and back it if you feel so inclined. I do appreciate it. Nice. It's, you know, it's I will tell you this, it is just such a blast doing this stuff. It really is. And for all of you guys who tune in and check it out, you know, I do appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll do more of this stuff now that I have this set up. It's going to be so much easier. So everybody have a good evening. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for tuning in, all right? And peace. I will see you guys soon.